This is the last class of the series of 6 classes, and I want to begin by just thanking every one of you who've come every time and been a part of this quite often. These type of talking to Tim just a moment ago about typically classes like this taper off and fade a little bit, and because we've had to break it up a little bit because of my meeting schedule, that's I expected a little more tapering off, and I appreciate the interest all of you have had. We've had some to drop out for one reason or another, but anyway, I appreciate the fact that you've come. We're ready for the last one of the 6. We've talked about foundations to build on, causes and cures of affairs, communication skills, building and restoring love, and last week and this week we're talking about meeting each other's needs. This is part 2 of that. I want to remind you of some principles before we get underway here, and continuing our list of 10 principles. Some foundation principles about the workbook, the book that we've been talking about, His Needs, Her Needs. And I reference it here from Harley, page 15. He makes 2 points, 2 reasons why there are conflicts in marriage. And those 2 basic reasons are couples fail to make each other happy. And the second reason, couples make each other unhappy. Those are not the same thing, though they sound like they are. Meaning by that when there is a conflict in a marriage circumstance, it's usually because one of them has done something or failed to do something they should have, and on the other hand, someone may have done something that they shouldn't have, and therefore they're unhappy. The reference material we're talking about, Dr. Harley's book on His Needs, Her Needs. There are 10 basic needs, 5 for the woman, 5 for the man, and we're going to look at the last of those in just a moment. We'll come back to that. Our goal is to know and meet each other's needs in a marriage. This is what we're talking about. And our goal is that we want to become aware of each other's emotional needs and learn how to meet them. And if that's not our goal, then we go back to the principle of what marriage is about, what is the principle of love, etc., because of some principles we're going to look at here in just a second. But that's our goal in these 2 classes. Now let's list some reasons we've already talked about. Some of you may have notes from that from last week. Let's go over 5 reasons why we need to meet each other's needs or meet our mate's needs. What did we talk about? Reasons that I want to meet my mate's needs because what? Makes them happy. What else? I'm sorry.
We're commanded to love.
Commanded to love, absolutely. We need to love our mates, and that's part of love. How can I love them, but I don't care about meeting their needs? If you love your children, you meet their needs, whatever they are. You love your friend, you want to meet their needs. If you love your mate, you meet their needs. What else? Yeah, we want to treat them the way we want to be treated. The golden rule, Matthew 7 and verse 12. Principle of self-denial, self-control, suppressing our interest and the interest of others, particularly in this case our mate. What else could we say? Reasons to meet each other's needs, our mate's needs. All right, absolutely. Yeah, if we don't meet those needs, the temptation is to go elsewhere, to have those needs met, which makes one vulnerable to an affair. Not all needs will meeting, or someone else meeting those needs leads to an affair necessarily. But we talked about conversation. She has a need for conversation. If he's not much of a conversationalist, and she doesn't get that at home, she's going to find that in someone else. And that may not lead to an affair, but it sets the stage for that. Number 4, which we skipped, is so that our needs will be met. That's not just a selfish, I want to meet your needs only because I want mine met, but if we expect our needs to be met, then we want their needs to be met, and that happens in return. Now, I want to go back over this principle, though you know it well. I hope to by repetition, get this in your head so that you constantly think about this love bank principle. For those who haven't been here, this woman and this man are married to each other. This is a friend, maybe a co-worker of the man. And the man has, and we're going to reverse that in the woman in just a moment, but this man has a love bank, and she makes deposits in his love bank every time she meets his needs, whatever they may be. And when she does something that makes him happy, she's making deposits in the love bank. Now, every time she does something to make him unhappy, either failing to meet his needs or she did something to make him unhappy, she's making withdrawals from that. And we all do that. We're all going to make deposits. We're all going to make withdrawals. So does someone else have accounts in our love banks. Other women have accounts in his love bank. That's not saying he's having an affair, but she comes along and she compliments him for being such a good-looking man. Or she says, you're such a talented man at what you do. And she's making deposits. 2 rules we talked about you need to remember. What were they? Make more deposits than withdrawals. That's true in your own banking, isn't it? When you've got a bank account, if you make more deposits than withdrawals, you're okay. When you start making more withdrawals than deposits, you're in trouble. Second rule. Yeah, make sure you make more deposits than someone else. So, if you, in this case, if she's making deposits in her husband's account and she knows this secretary of his or she knows a friend has been making compliments, how talented you are, you're such a smart man, you're such a good-looking guy. She's not worried about that because she realizes I'm making more deposits than she is. And she doesn't feel threatened by that. And this is Harley's illustration. And so for fairness, let's reverse that. And so he's making deposits in her love bank. And he also makes withdrawals. And so this other man compliments her or praises her somehow. And he's making deposits. Again, the same 2 principles apply. Make more deposits than withdrawals. Make sure that you have more deposits than someone else. The last time we talked about the first 5 of these. She has a need for affection. He has a need for sexual fulfillment. She has a need for conversation. He has a need for recreational companionship. And she has a need for openness and honesty. And so today let's finish that and look at the last 5 of those. And so we're going to look at, he has a need for an attractive spouse. She has a need for financial support. He has a need for domestic support. She has a need for family commitment. And he has a need for admiration. Now, a reminder that when we talk, for example, let's go back to these 5. He may have a need for an affection, and she may have a need for sexual fulfillment, and he may have a need for conversation. Our point was, this is from a survey that Harley, in his book, talks about, from among those that he canceled, that these were the top needs for the women, the 5 for women, and these were the top 5 needs for men. Doesn't mean that he doesn't have a need for our financial support, or she doesn't have a need for domestic support. Those are also true. Let's start with this one, attractiveness of a spouse. Let's define what we're talking about. And again, this is from Harley. We're going to put some scripture to the principle of what we're talking about. But here's what he means by attractiveness of a spouse. One of the needs that men in his survey revealed is that he had a need for an attractive spouse. By that he meant, page 202 of Harley, keeping physically fit with diet and exercise, wearing her hair, clothing, and if female, he was talking in general terms here. Obviously, if he's married, it ought to be a female. Makeup in a way that you find attractive and tasteful. Make sense what he's talking about? He has a need for an attractive spouse. We'll say more about that toward the end of this segment. Let's talk about some general principles now that would say that that's what she ought to be. There's no passage that says she needs to be attractive. Wives, be submissive to your husbands and be attractive for them. It's not worded that way. Is there any principle of the Bible that you could cite that says she ought to try to be as attractive to him as possible? Or do we scrap that principle and say that's not even a biblical principle at all? Or there's no principle that applies to that? Don't think too specific. Think in very general terms.
Where it talks about women are to not merely adorn themselves with braided hair and things like that. It's not saying you don't focus on that at all. It's just so you still want to look at the extent that the husband says or the inward part, but it also kind of touches on the outward.
Good point. Good point. Let's think about that, those passages. 1 Timothy 2 would be one, and 1 Peter chapter 3 would be another that Tammy's talking about. And I don't even have those listed here, but I'm glad she mentioned that. There have been those who have taken that to an extreme. I've known of some women who are just kind of, they don't, how do I word this? They don't even try to be attractive to their husbands. And they would, I think, appeal to this principle that, you're not to adorn with the outward adorning of the wearing of the hair, etc. Notice 1 Timothy 2 and in verse 9, adorn themselves in modest apparel, not with braided hair, gold, or pearls, or costly clothing. And as Tammy just pointed out, that's not saying she couldn't wear gold. It doesn't mean she couldn't wear clothing. I guess I'm thinking of 1 Peter more. I'm just thinking out loud here. Some have argued from those passages, yes, in 1 Peter 3 and in verse 3, not let her beauty be the outward adorning of the arranging of the hair, wearing of gold, or putting on of, and it's in italics, fine apparel. Actually, the text says putting on of apparel. The point is, she is not, her emphasis is not to be on her apparel, on her wearing of gold. That's not to be where her emphasis is. If it is saying she can't be attractive and she can't wear jewelry, she can't wear her hair in a certain way, it's also saying she can't wear apparel. Because the word fine is italicized. Does that make sense? It is not forbidding her wearing clothes. If it does, that violates the principle of modesty somewhere. The point is, that's not saying she can't be attractive. And that's an excellent point, Tammy. Let me list 3 principles here. What about Matthew 7 and in verse 12, the golden rule? She wants him to look good looking for her. Would that principle not apply that she wants to be attractive to him? What about Philippians 2 and verse 4? Look not every man upon his own things, but every man also upon the things of others. Don't just think about yourself, but think about others. She's to think about him. How does he view her? What does he have to look at? Mark 8:34, self-denial. How would self-denial play to this principle that he needs an attractive spouse? Yeah. She doesn't just think about herself, but she thinks about him. Those are some Bible principles. Now, let's describe a common problem. Quite often in some marriages, people let themselves go after the marriage relationship. How so? They don't dress to look attractive to their mate. They don't fix themselves, such as their hair, the makeup, etc., for their mate. Harley observes this, page 111. At best, this kind of marriage limps along. Often the husband is tempted to turn to other women whom he finds more attractive. What did he just say? Yeah. And we're not talking about, let's not confuse anything here. We're not talking about him looking at his wife with lustful thoughts because she's attractive, and therefore he's going to look at another woman with lust. He might, but that's not what we're talking about here. He's wrong if he does that. It's the idea that in the survey that Harley talks about, that the man generally said, I have a need for an attractive spouse. I want my wife to look attractive for me. And Harley is observing that when after the marriage, after they've already got each other, she just kind of lets herself go. And that's what he sees most of the time when he sees her. She fixes up when they go out, but when they're at home and around the house, she's just kind of, she doesn't even comb her hair. She wears the ratty clothes, and that's all he sees. Then when he goes to work every day, and these women that he's around every day at work that are attractively dressed, we beginning to see a problem? That's his image of those women who may go home and look like whatever when they get home, but that's what he thinks they look like all the time, and his wife he thinks looks like she doesn't even care. Now, let's go further. Harley advises, be the person you were when you were dating. Remember when you started dating and you tried to look attractive, you tried to look good, you cared about how you appeared, you wanted to look your best, as I said, you tried to be attractive. Again, a quote from Harley. I simply mean that she should try to look the way her husband likes for her to look. She should resemble the woman he married. Does that make sense? What'd that just say?
That's what you were doing when you won each other over, really trying to impress each other and change you next to the person that you chose.
Yeah.
And if you move away from that and give up on that, it's not the same.
Yeah. You think when you're going out on your first date and you think, I can't go out looking like this. I've got to fix my hair. I've got, this outfit doesn't look good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to look attractive. And then after the marriage, often that goes out the window. Here's a principle that Harley observes, and I think it applies for, with the biblical principles we talked about. And that is look good for your mate. What does that mean? Look good for your mate. Try to look attractive for your mate.
You're not trying to look good for anyone else.
Absolutely.
That's not any better. That's what.
Absolutely. If you think of what the impression that leaves, that when you're around your mate, you don't care how you look. Now, I know there's going to be times that your mate's going to see you in your worst condition. That happens. We're family members. We see each other that way. But my point is, when your husband sees you most of the time and your hair's not combed and you're not fixed up and you don't look presentable to go out to the world, but then when you say, let's go to visit so-and-so, and let's go to our friend's house, and then she fixes and dolls herself up and she looks very attractive for other people, what did I just say to him? I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for others. How I appear to others is more important to me than how I appear to you. And when a woman dresses herself in such a way and even tells her husband, I did this for you, she scores big points with him. Sometimes Joan will buy a particular colored dress or fix her hair a certain way because I'll tell her that's what I like. And then when she says, I did this for you, that scores big points. And every man in here will agree with that. That when she says, I did this for you, not for everybody else, I fixed up for you. Where are we going tonight? We're not going anywhere. We're going to be right here today. But I fixed myself up for you. That scores big, big, big points. Quote from Harley again. When she looks good, he feels good. A man with the need for an attractive spouse feels good whenever he looks at his attractive wife. In fact, that's what emotional needs are all about. We're talking about emotional needs. It's an excellent point he makes. When one of his emotional needs is met, he feels fulfilled, and when it's not met, he feels frustrated. And so she's meeting one of his emotional needs. And she may think, this is not a big deal. What's the big deal about me kind of fixing my hair and putting some makeup on and putting some clothes on that looks decent, and because we're just going to be here today. And yet, that's a very much of an important point. Now, somewhere, I don't have the reference, but somewhere Harley made this point. I credit him because I think he knows this subject better than I do as far as the emotional needs. But attractiveness is what you do with what you have. And we can make all kind of jokes about that and laugh about that, but when we get through with it and we get serious, that doesn't mean she has to be a beauty queen and that she's going to look like a beauty queen. But whoever she is, she can, when she does what she can with what she has, that's what he's after. Does that make sense? And so she may not win a beauty contest. That's fine. That's not what he's after. He wants her to look as attractive as she can for him. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about her need for financial support. Let's see what that means. Quote from Harley, page 203. Provision of the financial resources to house, feed, clothe your family at a standard of living acceptable to you, but avoiding travel and work hours that are unacceptable to you. What did that just say? What's her need? She wants to be provided for. But at the same time, she does not want him to, finish my sentence, work too much or be gone all the time. But she wants adequate support. She wants financial support. Now let's talk about Bible principles. So let's put this together. Man is to provide for his family. Where would I find that principle? It might be there. Exactly. 1 Timothy 5 and 8. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 8. Man does not provide for his own. He's denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Actually, that passage is talking about man providing for his, if there's a widow, and if his mother's a widow, he needs to provide for her. But the same principle applies. His wife is his own, is it not? His children are his own. He provides for them. Even in the context, you may provide for grandparents, because if there's someone who's in need in their grandchildren, let them show piety at home. Remember that? 1 Timothy 5, beginning at verse 1. Anyway, man is to provide for his family. That's a Bible principle. So when a fellow's going to get married, he needs to think, you know what? I've got to provide for her and any children we have from this marriage. So I need to think about what I'm doing, what I can do. Can I provide for her? And can I make provision for that? That it doesn't mean she can't help with that. Why would I cite Proverbs 31? What does it tell me that says that doesn't mean he has to be the sole provider, but he has the responsibility. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, she had, that's not just a matter of she had a little craft on the side. Apparently this woman in Proverbs 31 had a business. And she could buy land, she could sell land, she could make provisions, and was a very hard worker in the things that she did. So man is to provide for his family. It doesn't mean she can't work. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Well, now God wants man to be a hard worker and do his best. This is an important Bible principle. Do you agree with that? Number one. And number two, how could I show that to be true? That what God expects of a man is to work hard and to do his best at what he does. If he digs ditches and that's what he does, he needs to be the best ditch digger, and he needs to get in there, and I mean, he needs to dig. Grab the shovel, make sure it's sharp, and let's go. Don't be lazy. Where would I find the Bible principle? Colossians 3:13 would be one, or verse 23, not 13. What does Colossians 3:23 say? Whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord, with life and vitality. It's talking about you're working for your master. And whatever you're doing, even though you're working for this master, you work like you're working for the Lord, because that's really who you're working for. So you go and you say, my boss stinks, and he just or she stinks, and I don't care a thing about them. You're not working for them, you're working for the Lord. Make sense? So man needs to be a hard worker, needs to do his best. Ecclesiastes 9, whatever your hand... Absolutely. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. Put all your life and vitality and gusto in that. And so be a hard worker. We need to be diligent and hard workers. Let's look at a couple of these. We won't notice all of these probably, but let's somebody get to Proverbs 12:24 and 27. Those are in the same section. Who has that? And then we'll come back to you. Who's got that? All right. And Stephen, I saw your hand go up. Let's get 10 and 4, and I need 13 and 4 from someone else. All right. So let's get these right here. Every one of these passages deal with God expects man to be a diligent worker. Let's start with Proverbs 12:24 and then verse 27.
The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be fit to forced labor. Whoever is slothful will not roast his grain, but the diligent man will get precious wealth.
What those passages say, just summarize. I'm going to get the general principle, not the details. The lazy person, slothful, doesn't pay off, but the hard worker ends up rewarded. Isn't that what it said? All right, what was the next one? 10 and 4, Stephen.
Poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich.
What'd that say? Anybody? Hard work pays off. Let's get the last one. 13 and 4. That was Kyle, I think.
The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied.
Okay. What'd that say? Same thing, wasn't it? Hard work pays off. Here's the point. God wants you to be a hard worker, and man's to provide for himself. That means he needs to be a hard, diligent worker. Here's what that means. That the man needs to have drive, he needs to have ambition, he needs to have incentive, he needs to be the kind that strives for promotion, and who's willing to make a change in his career if necessary to provide for his family. Listen to me, ladies, if you're not already hooked with a man and you're dating a guy, or you come up on a guy and you're dating him, he doesn't have drive and ambition, it ain't going to get any better. You'll have to provide for him. Does that make sense? I know of women who've had to provide for their husbands because he has no drive, he has no ambition, and I've given them advice. You better stay clear of that, because you're going to spend the rest of your life providing for him, because he's never going to have a decent job. He's never going to have one. You're looking for a man that's got drive, ambition, incentive. He wants to work, and when he sees, you know what, I can change careers and make more money to provide for my family and yet not sacrifice my family and spirituality, he's willing to do that. That's the kind of man that you're looking for. Now, most women want and need financial stability. She wants to live comfortable and yet make ends meet. What does that mean? Or what would that mean?
She wants to not have to worry about how much money she spends at the grocery store, or being able to
Okay, yes. She wants to live a comfortable life, and by yet making ends meet, we could live a comfortable life and yet be borrowing money all the time, couldn't we? Most anybody can get a credit card for $10,000 and get another for $10,000, and you can live for a little while just living a high lifestyle, but it's going to catch up with you. You're not making ends meet. The point is, she wants support where, as Alex just said, she can have the basic needs of life and live comfortable, and yet at the same time, needs are being met. For many men, they don't mind debt. Living on the edge, behind on bills doesn't bother them. I know of men who, they're behind, they're 4 or 5 months behind on the house payment. The car is about to be repossessed, et cetera, and he just kind of, okay, whatever. That drives her absolutely crazy. A husband that doesn't have any drive, no ambition, is withdrawing from her love bank constantly. Big hits on the love bank. And stability means more to her than wealth. I think every woman here would agree with that. That if you had the choice, I could be wealthy, but that's really not what I want. I'm just wanting stability. And maybe we might have to watch our budget, but we're stable and we can live within our means and we're provided for. I think most women would agree with that. Now, most women resent having to work. And I should emphasize and should have underlined the word having. It's in italics. But I didn't say most women resented working. But most women resent having to work. When she has to work, when she has no choice, most women resent that. She resents not having a choice in that. And here's some of the consequence that comes. She is either unhappy working or she's unhappy living a lower quality life. And her love bank is hit hard because she feels like I'm forced because he's not working, or he doesn't have drive, he doesn't have incentive, etc. Now, let's talk about some dangers when she has to work. There is no choice. She has to go to work. What are some dangers of that? Okay. Expand a little bit. What are we talking about?
You know, just the option of the child's own mother being able to take care of them and see taking time to raise and spend time with their children versus you have both working and kids are at daycare and that kind of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. She becomes frustrated because she's not with her children. She's got to go to work and she works all day and somebody else has been with her kids most of the day and she wants to be mother, but she's trying to provide and she's just frustrated and her love bank has been hit hard. What else happens when she has to work? And I'm not talking about temporarily. I think in many marriages, particularly in the modern day, the woman may have to work for a while at least. And she may choose to work the whole marriage. Bring the children, that's not even what we're talking about. But when she's locked in and she wants to take time with kids and she has to work because they can't make ends meet without it. She may resent it. What else are some dangers? That's a hard act to joke. Absolutely. Absolutely. The different schedules, I'm going to start with 3 and then I'll come back to number 2. The different schedules create a strain on the marriage. It may be that he works days, she works nights. He could very well feel inadequate when she has to work because he doesn't feel like he's providing for her. Child care is done by another. Kyle's already mentioned that. And then she has problems maybe being a keeper at home, and she feels like I'm failing there because I'm having to work and I'm failing as a keeper at home, Titus 2 and in verse 5. Now, let's talk about some suggestions. What would you suggest to a couple, some things that could be done to avoid making sure she has financial support and they don't have these conflicts? What kind of suggestions would you make? More in general terms than really specific. Let me start the list. You may have. I might suggest self-control with money. They don't have to live high on the hog's back. They don't have to eat out as much as they do. They may not have to have the internet plan they have. They may not have to have the cable program they have. They may not even have to have the amount of cars that they have, etc. They could use some self-control with money, and that may curtail some things. What else could we suggest to them? So she has her need for financial support.